thank you all for coming out. But tonight is a special night because we've got some of my favorite people in the house. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, my friend and associate executive editor, moderator, 8-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Mr. Maynard Eaton.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure being here. This legislative session is probably one of the most severe, perhaps one of the most draconian in terms of the cuts. It was a bloody session. Yet, as we'll hear, there were some victories, at least one moderate victory for folks like myself who ride public transportation. It saved MARTA at the 11th hour. But much more happened as well. We had invited for this segment a representative from the state Senate, Vincent Fort, and perhaps to me, the most dynamic legislator, black legislator in the state. She, to me, she travels the country speaking about education. She may well be the youngest, most dynamic, most well-spoken. Our guest tonight is Representative Alicia Thomas Morgan. Believe me, she's good. Have a seat. And if Senator Ford comes in, we'll have him sit here on the side. But right now, we're going to go with the queen of the legislature. Give us a sense, though, Representative Morgan, how tough was this session? I mean, we hear all the dire reports. Was it as bad as we were left to believe? Was it as tough as left to believe?
Absolutely. First, I want to say good evening to everyone, and thank you for being here, and thank you for having me. I also want to acknowledge my colleague, Howard Mosby. He was introduced as being from Grady, and that is true, but we also came in together in the legislature, so whatever I can't answer, he can.
He can.
But to answer your question...
I didn't know you two came in
we
together.
We did. We came in together. To answer your question, yes, this session was very difficult. Maybe not for some of the reasons that others would say, but I think it was most difficult because of the budget crunch that we are in. You know, when Georgians aren't working, they're not paying taxes, and we don't have the revenues that we need to provide state services. And there was a philosophical debate going on in the midst of all of this. So when you have a $4 billion deficit, which is really what it is, just a couple years ago, we had a $21 billion budget. This year it was 17.8.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money and a lot of people on the end of those, on the end of that deficit. But there was a philosophical debate going on between people like me and Howard and others who were saying, when people aren't working, they depend on the safety net of government more than ever before. But on the other hand, there was this school of thought that now is our chance to cut government. You know, we believe that government is already too big, and this is a great opportunity to not fund all of the programs that we wanted to fund. And so it was extremely challenging.
Was that due part and parcel to the Tea Party movement and that philosophy?
I think that had a lot to do with it. There were a lot of groups that weighed in, but certainly the Tea Party nationally had a strong voice in this. But some of the leaders in the legislature don't need any help in terms of their conservatism and just their belief that we have colleagues that don't believe there should be any government whatsoever.
Wow.
And so some of the bills that we saw, cutting complete departments out.
Like arts was gone, right, for a while.
Yes, it was. There was a move in the House to cut the Georgia Council for the Arts, and when it came back to when it went to the Senate, they restored some of that funding. And so, yes, it was very difficult, and a lot of policies that we would have wanted to see were not able to pass because if it had a price tag to it, it was a no.
Like what? What hurt you the most? I know you're an education aficionado and expert. Education in 8 years has lost billions of dollars. I mean, even when times were good, education was cut. We're almost last in the country with regard to education. How is that? I mean, what's the philosophy there?
That's a great question. And the short answer is, first of all, it's debatable whether or not education has been cut the way that I would say my Democratic colleagues have talked about it. According to the governor, there is more education funding this year than ever before. But at the same time, you're right, when it comes to the quality basic education funding, which is the state dollars that are apportioned to each school district based on the number of students they have, those dollars are shorter. But I think it's important to point out a couple of things. Number one, the way that we fix education is not throwing more money at it. When we look at the D.C. public schools, when we look at, there's a district, Newark, New Jersey as an example. My home. They spend over $20,000 per pupil, and their graduation rates and other numbers are pretty poor. And the same could be said for Georgia. And so the question is not how do we spend more money, the question is how do we spend more money more efficiently when you talk about funding education, and where do those dollars go? I think that the worst of what we saw this session was a lack of movement on education reform.
When you say reform, what do you suggest about how we go about doing things, or in the classroom, or the funding mechanism?
All of the above. I think we do have to look at funding. There are districts in this state that their per pupil funding is, $5,000 or $6,000. Other districts, it's $8,000 to $10,000. Atlanta, because of some of the grants that they have, is up to $16,000, just depending on where you are in the state. And so there is a question about our schools being funded adequately. But when we talk about education reform, we have to talk about what's happening in the classroom. I think someone from the New Teacher Project said it best. When we make decisions about where kids are educated, it's not so much about the district that they're in, it's not even the school that they're in, it's the classroom that they're in. Who is the grown person standing in front of that child providing an education? And if you look at national statistics, you will see that the teachers who are less effective are more likely to be in classrooms where students are black and brown and are low income. And so if you look at that, not just in Georgia, but all over the country, I don't need to tell you why our graduation rate is really 50%. And so the question...
Why is it those teachers are in those classrooms? What do you suspect is a reason for that?
Well, there are a lot of reasons for that. First of all, it's hiring practices. It is the fact that newer and less effective teachers are more likely to go where there are opportunities. Right. And then we have a very poor evaluation system in Georgia. Right now, the law allows for every single school district to have their own evaluation system. That makes no sense. So in Cobb County, a teacher is measured one way. In Douglas County or Gwinnett or Butts County, they're measured in a different way. And so when you talk about a quality education in Georgia and ensuring that every child gets a quality education, but the evaluation system is different, how do we know how effective teachers are? And so we have to have those difficult conversations. And you ask, what do I mean by education reform? It means having those difficult conversations about supporting those teachers who are excellent and giving them the tools that they need to do their job, training those teachers who are less effective, and those who need to find a new profession, encouraging them to do that. And we don't like having that conversation.
You butt heads with some Democrats over that very issue.
Absolutely, and I'll do it every day.
Because what? Because you think there is a lot of waste in the system?
I think there is some waste in the system. I think the biggest waste, though, is the minds who are being affected by ineffective teachers and principals and other school administrators who are just kind of coasting, because at the end of the day, their kids are in private school or they're in some other school. It's the same issue that I have with some of my colleagues who talk about wanting to improve public education, but their kids are in private school. And so the question is, how serious are you about improving education, and what is your sense of urgency? Is it going to take 20 years? Well, sure, while my child goes through 12 years of school, let me keep talking about how I'm going to reform education.
As opposed to actually doing it.
And we have to talk about offering kids choices. Kids go to school based on their zip code, not based on what's in the best interest of the child, what's in the best interest of the family. And we need to get to a point where kids are going to school based on what is in the best interest of the child and how they are best educated. Whether that's a charter school, a traditional public, for some it's private, for others it's a magnet school. There are all kinds of options that kids should have available to them.
Do you favor vouchers?
I do. Not any old voucher, but I support the ability for parents to be able to choose what's in the best interest of their children. That's a very unpopular statement.
Almost borders on being conservative, does it not?
You know, I actually believe, and this is going to be a little crazy, but I think it is progressive to want to level the playing field and say that I'm a legislator, my husband is he has a job, he does what he does. We have the opportunity to choose where our children are going to go to school.
Right.
I want every child in the state of Georgia to have an opportunity to choose where they go to school based on their best interest. And so I think it's a progressive value to say, I want to level the playing field. And I want to say that my child can go to Destiny Christian Academy, which is where my 3-year-old daughter goes, just like they can go to Bryant Elementary School down the street. It's not Woodward Academy of, $17,000 tuition, but it's $6,000. That's affordable, and that's going to provide my daughter, and that's where she will go. She's going to get a quality education. I don't have to worry about who's got a gun, who wants to, beat her up because she's got a boyfriend. We don't have to worry about those kinds of things. And as a parent, I should have the ability to choose where my child goes to school.
Is that a personal indictment on the state of public education, or is you as a mother saying that's what's best for my child?
It's a mother saying this is what is in the best interest of my child. And I believe that every parent in this state ought to have that opportunity. And most of them are going to choose a public school, and that's where we want most of our kids to go. That's what the state constitution says, that our responsibility is to provide a quality education for every child in the state. But we have to have options within that, and I don't think that private schools are the answer, but I think that there have got to be some real quality choices. And again, that's charter, that's virtual academies, are all kind of options available that kids should have access to.
Chuck Day, one of our sponsors here, just did a pre-K lottery this week, his company, and it was interesting to see how passionate these parents were about getting their children into the proper place, their first choice for their pre-K. And that's where education begins. I mean, We can talk about all this reform we want, but if it doesn't start there, we're really blowing against the wind, are we not?
Yes. And what's interesting about both pre-K and the Hope Scholarship, public funds, because they're lottery funds, you can choose public or private where you want your child to go for pre-K, and you can do the same for higher education. But there's something about K through 12 that we're just stuck on. The zip code determines where you go. Parents shouldn't have a choice. And we know what the answer or the challenge is to that. And that is the establishment. And that includes, yes, some of the teachers' unions. It includes the establishment in terms of the Superintendents Association and the School Boards Association. It is a status quo that is protecting their jobs rather than doing what is in the best interest of a child.
The school commissioner, the school czar, if you will,
Arnie Duncan.
Arnie Duncan has recommended some radical things, some different things. You sent me an email once saying you support him almost wholeheartedly. Could you subsidize? Just simply say what is it about what he's asking for, what did you like? He's talking about getting rid of some schools totally. Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's a comprehensive model, and it starts from things like taking over schools that have been underperforming for years. Right. Talking about schools that have not met expectations for 8, 10, 12 years. Would I leave my child in a school that is underperforming for 12 years? Absolutely not. Would I want you to do that? Absolutely not. So it's giving states the opportunity to come in, get all of those administrators and some of the teachers out, at least 50% of those, have them reapply for their jobs, and bring in a new, fresh set of individuals and leaders who are innovative, who have high expectations for our students, who are willing to go against the grain when it comes to education. But it also goes to things like improving teacher quality and looking at student growth rather than just a test score. That's one of the problems with the current No Child Left Behind, is that students are graded based on just one test score. You pass or fail, you go to the next grade, you are considered meeting expectations or not meeting expectations, needing improvement based on one test score. Under this new model, which I support, and I'm on a national working group of legislators from around the country, and we talk a lot about this and look at the reforms that need to happen. But we're talking about, I think this is helpful to teachers, looking at judging students based on growth. So if I'm a 5th grade teacher and I get a student that comes to me on a 3rd grade reading level and I get them up to the 4th grade, they're still not going to pass the CRCT, but they've been growing over that year. So it's judging teachers. Yes, they've learned, and it's judging teachers based on what they've been able to do, based on who's coming into the classroom.
Now you're traveling the country now doing this, are you not?
I do.
Because this become your passion and your profession.
I get up every morning thinking about how I can improve education opportunities for kids in this state and in the country.
How effective were you in doing that in the legislature this session?
This session, not so much. That was probably my biggest disappointment, that we did not pass any real education reform. Last year, in 2009, I did pass House Bill 251, which provides for public school choice for students, so that if there is space in the school, students can transfer based on, again, what's in the best interest of the child and the family, as long as it's within the school district.
Do you have the support of the Black Caucus in your efforts, or are you?
It's pretty split. You know, like many legislators, some of us care a lot about education, right. Others don't. Others, it's health care or economic development. And I think that those who understand education and who are willing to make decisions based on what's in the best interest of their children and others are very supportive.
Will we learn much about your thoughts, your beliefs, your passions on education in your new book? And could you just talk about that just a bit?
Thank you. I talk a little bit about education in the book, but I really talk more about the need, particularly there's a chapter that's called No Permanent Friends, No Permanent Enemies, Just Permanent Interests. Right. And it's about the lessons that I have learned in working on education policy. When I first got to the legislature, you know, I had a set mindset. I came up in the NAACP. I knew I was against vouchers. I couldn't really tell you why, but that's what I was taught to believe, and so that's what I would espouse. I thought Republicans were all evil. I mean, I had all of the stuff.
In fact, you walked out at one point, didn't you?
I did, and would do it again. Some of them do have some problems, and Democrats do as well. But I learned the importance, and particularly when it comes to black people, about focusing on the issues and not the party. We get so married to, the Democrats. But if you look at the Democratic record, particularly when you talk about issues like criminal justice and how many people are being locked up that look like us, those were Democrats that passed those bills. So we have to start asking the question, where are the issues that line up with us? If you're a Democrat or Republican, I want to know where you are on the issues.
I have a Republican friend who says, man, if Democrats were so good for black folks, why aren't black folks doing better?
And that's an important question, and we all have to ask ourselves. In 2010, we have more black elected officials than we've ever had in our history. So why, when it comes to every important indicator, are we at the bottom as a community? Right. And I think that the problem is, I ask this question. Insanity is when you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. But what is it when you have no expectations at all? And I think that's the problem with elected officials, that we don't have expectations of our constituents to be involved in this process. And constituents don't have many expectations of us.
Well, that's just true.
And when you have that ongoing cycle, you can have as many black elected officials as you want, because no one is going to ask me, what have I accomplished this session? I've been in office for 8 years, and if I walk out saying that I've passed no bills, I've got no policies changed, what am I there for? And so, yes, I have I do not apologize for standing up to the speaker in 2005 around the voter ID issue. Would do it again. But at the same time, when it comes to providing opportunities for kids to be educated, there was House Bill 251. When my constituents were affected by the floods of 2009, I had to get down to the legislature and do something to help my constituents. And so I passed House Bill 1019, which allows for any Georgian, provided that the governor signs the bill, who was affected by a federally declared disaster for a period of 60 days to be able to get their state documents replaced for free. That's going to the legislature and using the process to help people. Because if you're not doing that, what are you there for?
Thank you. But you hear many Democrats and black elected officials say, well, it's Republican dominated, so I can't get anything done.
I hear it all the time, and I used to say it myself. And I believe that. And there is some truth. I think it depends on what issue you work on. But I also think and this is what I do talk about this in the book as well, you have to learn to choose your battles. And I have learned that. I mean, the first 3 years of session, every single issue that I cared about, I was up in the well, raising hell, taking names, all of that. And I think that there's always a time and a place. I never want to get to a point where I'm not standing up for my very strong convictions. But at the same time, it's choosing my battles and at the same time developing relationships. And I don't think as a Democrat you can go in the legislature or any body and say, well, I'm a Democrat, you're Republican, so we can't work together. Not when they have the control.
Exactly.
You've got to figure out, how do I work this process without selling my soul, standing up for what I believe in, staying convicted in my passions, and still getting things done.
Can you still do that today? Is it still worth it being a young, dynamic black elected official? Or is it, I've heard some frustration in your voice at times with Democrats and Republicans, with black folks and white folks. Is it still worth it? I mean, you still enjoying it? Are you going to stay there or move on up?
Well, do I enjoy it? Overall, I do. You know, it's an incredible privilege to be able to serve, particularly in elective office, and be able to use your position to help people and to leverage whatever power, quote unquote, you have to provide resources in your community in whatever way that is. Is it frustrating? Absolutely, and I do get frustrated with my colleagues, Democrat, Republican, white, black, you know, young, old. But I think it's a frustrating process, and that's what happened. And it's the beauty and it's the weakness. I think when you have all these people who come from different walks of life all around the state, who have different opinions, different life experiences. So it's something that I want to continue to do at least for a couple more years, and I'm thinking about what my next steps are.
You've been urged to move on up.
I have.
Perhaps what sort of offices might that entail?
He's good, isn't he? I mean, he's really going to work this. Well, one of the things that is on my plate of consideration is State Superintendent of Education.
One.
I'm glad y'all are clapping.
I was hoping you'd say that.
I'm strongly considering that.
This?
No, in 4 years.
4 years.
Yes.
Lastly, we hear so much about black elected officials. And you hear them disparaged. You hear them complimented like yourself. You ran for the chairmanship of the Legislative Black Caucus, the largest in the country, 2 years ago. Am I correct?
Yes.
Didn't win.
Vice chair.
Last year, okay. I hear it all the time. I mean, what are they doing? Why can't they get anything done? It's just a lament that you hear. It's almost it resonates in almost every conversation about the Georgia legislature. How do you answer that? What should I answer that? Are they largely ineffective? Are they disjointed? Or is it just the nature of the beast? They can't get much done because of the Republican stronghold?
Unfortunately, I would say it's all of those things. I think there are a lot of dynamics within the Black Caucus. Indeed, we're the largest in the country, and we're very proud of that. But I don't think we leverage that in the way that we should. I think part of the challenge is many of the Black Caucus leadership, if you will, even if they don't have a position, are in leadership within the Democratic Caucus. And so I think the agenda gets lost. So if the Democrats have an agenda, whatever that might be, the Black Caucus tends to follow that. And the people who are leading within the Democratic Caucus push that agenda, and unfortunately I think we tend to follow suit. But I would say on an individual basis, there are many Black Caucus members who have been able to successfully pass legislation. Senator Jones, who is our chairman, passed a zero-tolerance bill this session that is really going to help children in schools not be affected and really be funneled into the juvenile or criminal justice system. And so individually, there are members who are working hard and getting things done. I just don't think that we leverage the opportunity to work together as a group. And that's something that I think a strong chairman would be able to do. And they'd have a lot of work to do. I'm not running for chairman anymore. I'm leaving that to someone else. And
you said you're not going to run anymore. Was it that bruising?
I wouldn't say it was bruising, but I think, I ran for chair 4 years ago and ran for vice chair 2 years ago. And they'll probably kill me for saying this, but when I ran for vice chair, there were more votes cast than people in the room. And so no one could really explain what happened in that election. And so that was enough for me to realize that it probably is a good idea to use my leadership abilities somewhere else. And so that's what I've chosen to do. And I'm unapologetically Black. I will always be involved in the Black Caucus and do what I can to help. But that's not where I want to use my leadership abilities.
Anybody with questions for this young lady before we go on? I want to ask one last question before we leave, and then question, please. Steve will have the microphone for questions right here. Give me a sense, please, Representative Morgan, what this transportation bill means to commuters, but most of all to public transportation folks like myself. How important is it? This was really important, was it not?
It was very important for one reason, and that is that there was some movement. It was not important because of what it actually does. The transportation bill that we passed does a couple of things. One, it takes off the chains, if you will, from MARTA and the 50-50 rules that they have in terms of how they can spend your money. I don't live in Fulton or DeKalb, and the state does not support MARTA, so why we have so much power over them is beyond me.
That baffles me.
It is very, and we're one of the only states in the country that does not support public transportation, so it makes no sense. But the second thing that I think is important and is moving in the right direction is it allows for regional plans to be put together. And what will happen is in 2012, on the ballot, we will be able to vote as a state on a 1-cent sales tax increase. And regions can then get together and plan and decide how they want to use that 1 penny increase. And so there was a little bit of progress, but absolutely not enough. And it's going to take some real leadership, not just from DeKalb and Fulton, but all over the state, and certainly the leadership within the legislature, to stop looking at MARTA as a black run, all of the things that you could think of them saying is what they say, and look at it as an economic development tool,
right,
moving people back and forth to work, so that this state can get back on its feet.
One question now from.
Got me on the spot. How was your relationship with the Secretary of Education now? Your working relationship, was it Kathy Cox?
The state superintendent of education?
State superintendent.
I think it's pretty decent. When I had my bill that passed, we had some challenges in terms of implementation. So again, that's about relationships. There are some things I think she's done well. One of them is really change the curriculum in the state of Georgia and make it much more rigorous. And we've been nationally recognized for our curriculum in the state. That's caused some challenges in terms of achievement and how students have been able to do. But I do think that some areas that I'd like to see some growth in her is not supporting the status quo so much and instead doing what's in the best interest of families and parents and children, of course.
My question is to you. I heard you really concerned about education, which all of us should be because of our neighborhoods. But my question to you, who do you have as an organization will not only look at the school and the district and the teachers, but the neighborhood where mama's at, and they need help? Who do you have to be concerned of the neighborhood block?
That's a great question. One of the things I also like about this current federal administration, President Obama and Secretary Duncan, have both in the reauthorization of ESCA, also known as No Child Left Behind, as well as some funds that they've created called the Innovation Fund, for example. There's some neighborhood funding available. They really are wanting to focus on keeping schools open later so that schools aren't just shut down at 3 o'clock, but they become community centers, supporting community organizations to continue to provide services for kids once they get out of school, looking at ways to engage parents rather than punish them for not being involved. And so I think that there is a national conversation going on around engaging parents more and holding them accountable. But one thing that I have to say is that I used to be one of those people that said, well, it's got parents involved, we fix everything. But in the education system, we have to work on those things that we can control. What's going on those 8 hours that those kids are in a classroom? And if mama's involved or not, that does not say that a child cannot achieve because mama is not there. So I think when we can have both, we absolutely should. Having high standards.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you've had this to me is statewide.
No apologies. Powerful lesson in life and love.
Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause, please, for State Representative Alicia Thomas Morgan.
Thank you very much.
All right. Our next guest is running for the state legislature, Ms. Simone Joy.
Thank you. Simone, we were intended to have your elected opponent here with us to talk about your race. Give me a sense of what this race entails and why you're running?
Not to interrupt, he also confirmed, but you see that chair is empty. That's how
it's going to be next year in the legislature, because I'll be sitting there.
Why? What makes you think that? I mean, Billy Mitchell's an entrenched, established politician. He has some of his colleagues here from DeKalb County. I'm wondering, how's a young lady like yourself say it's time for him to go?
Well, it all began when I reached out for help from our state representative. And I came to him with a serious issue within our district, and that is homeless children who have been actually living in foreclosed homes, kind of setting up colonies out in Lithonia and Stone Mountain. We found a state facility in the city of Stone Mountain, which the governor shut down about 2 years ago. And so I went to him after going through the DeKalb County channels, the Housing Authority, to try to get this facility to open up some beds for some kids. And I had to chase him down for months, showing up where he was, calling the office, getting return messages, calling post return messages, not even a live person. And so pretty much one day, you know, I kind of cornered him and said, listen, I didn't come to you about transportation issues. I didn't come to you about the budget issues. I came to you about our babies. Our children are living on their own. And if you don't help me, I need to be in your seat because we need help for these kids. And, you know, of course, he laughed at me in the beginning. And I don't really think he's laughing now. But I think that Representative Mitchell is a good man. I think that he has outgrown the seat. He has outgrown District 88. I think that more people know him statewide than in our neighborhoods, than on Rockbridge Road. And
you're suggesting that it's time for him to move on to a higher office, and because this is grassroots kind of work you're suggesting?
Not so, you know, I'm not suggesting that he move on to a higher office. I'm suggesting that you don't sit still while our district had the highest loss of home appraisals in the entire state. You don't sit still when we were faced with so many foreclosures in DeKalb County. You don't sit still when, you know, we're up against losing funds to Dunwoody.
The passion is fine. The concerns are great. Mm-hmm. But what does a Simone Joy bring to the table that's missing now and that can improve the job that's being done?
I think that...
Is it just a passion of, I mean, a lot of young people want to run for office.
Right.
But do you bring the goods too?
I do, absolutely. I've been prepping for a run for political office all my life. I never really knew where I was going to land with that run or how I could be effective. And I think that because of my experience, my advocacy experience, my educational background, and just working on a host of political campaigns to help people get elected that really care about the people has positioned me well for this run. In addition to the fact that I've studied the legislation here in Georgia, and I see that there is time for generational change. There is time for 21st century innovative concepts to a lot of things that Georgia seem to be going around in circles on that are kind of no-brainers to members of my generation.
How do you see things being changed? So you just heard a young person, Representative Lisa Thomas Morgan, suggest her frustration. Mm-hmm. Would you not meet many of the same challenges given the Republican stronghold that has been there and the issues that confront DeKalb County? I mean, how do you make change when others have not?
I think that we've reached a pinnacle where we're already drowning. We're not going off the cliff. We have gone off the cliff. And I think that no matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, poverty hurts. It hurts everyone. And I think that there needs to be more champions like Representative Morgan who will stand up. And that's a beauty about our generation. We're not afraid of the Tea Party. We're not, you know, there are many legislators that have fought the good fight for our community, for our people. And I just believe that they lack the energy to come together to say, how do we fix solutions with 21st century ideas?
What's your assessment of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus? Honestly, how would you rate them? How would you grade them?
They're one of the largest, if not the largest, Black caucus, the largest, revered all across America. I think that the caucus, and I don't know them as a group, I just know individuals in the caucus are not very accepting of passing the torch. And I think that one of the reasons we continue to suffer, primarily in the African American community, is because we don't pass the torch. And you are not going to be respected by others when you don't respect your own constituents or you're cliquish. We can't afford that anymore as a people. You've reaped benefits. It is your job, it is your duty to save everyone, not just some. I think their effectiveness is being watered down. And it is simply because they won't sit down with people like me who want to run for office because they're friends with the incumbent or they owe favors to the incumbent. And I think that's wrong. I think it's bad, and I think it's bad for us in the state.
Give me your sense, if you will, of what your assessment of this legislative session. Some say it was very tough. You heard Representative Morgan's assessment of it. What do you think came out of it or didn't? I mean, if you're looking at issues, what are some of the things you will run on or run against in terms of what did not get done?
Well, I know DeKalb County got hurt. This whole 2010 Transportation Act that's out is going to double our investment within statewide transportation, and I think that's very unfair. I think that more legislators from DeKalb County, everyone should have voted no to it. We already paid 1 penny into MARTA. Fulton County already pays a penny. We sustain MARTA. And now this Transportation Act is pretty much saying DeKalb and Fulton County residents, now you're going to pay 2 cents without really promising us any new transportation initiatives for DeKalb or Fulton County. I also think that there's been a tremendous breakdown between what our state legislators do downtown and working effectively with our commissioners. You cannot run the county from the State House. You must work together with them. And when you have commissioners saying, this is bad business for us, this is bad for the county, I think that more of our state legislators need to understand how we need to work together. And so I think DeKalb County took a great hit with that. I think that the legislature has seemingly balanced the budget on the backs of poor people by removing a low-income credit, and they did that very quietly.
The last day.
The last day, the last hour. That is going to affect many poor families in Georgia. It's going to affect single income seniors.
But if you don't have the votes and you don't have the clout, how do you stop Republicans or others from doing just that?
Well, the same way we need their votes, they need ours. And I find, I can't speak on many other records because I've only been studying the incumbents, but I find that we have given away far too much than we have received. And I'm not really sure why that is, but the same way, although the Republicans are in the majority, Democrats can block a lot of the things they want. And so there's a balance there that I think has tilted just because it's the majority or because some of our legislators have forgotten why they sit in those seats.
I got to ask you this question. I mean, I've known you for a while. Is this political passion on your part or a political power grab on your part?
I think you must have passion to be successful at any job that you do. So it won't be work for me. I think that in any area right now today in Georgia where you have people who are stepping up to say, I want to be a part of the change that our nation has promised, whether it's the woman who is running her own business, struggling to get grant funding, or whether it's that nonprofit organization, or whether it's an attorney who's saying, hey, let's look at helping steer our young brothers away from the criminal justice system. I think we all need to have passion right now and compassion, because our people in Georgia are really hurting.
You didn't talk about the need, the desire for power, though. Is it? You see this as a power position? I mean, DeKalb's a powerful county, especially for black elected officials.
Well, power concedes nothing without the work in it. You know, is it a powerful position? I don't know yet. I'm not impressed with the people who are in the seat right now. I don't look at him as a powerful person. I look at him as a public servant who is there to serve the public. Will it garner power for the people who live in District 88? Perhaps, because we're going to get all the money when I'm elected. There's not going to be this issue of who we're selling out DeKalb County to, or Gwinnett, or why does Dunwoody get to walk away with $7 million in bonds for one of our parks? You need people that will speak up. So if that's a powerful move, then so be it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Simone Joy running for state office in District 55. Any questions for me before we go? Any questions for this candidate at all? Okay. Jim, welcome. You're on. Thank you, Simone. Appreciate it. Representative Moses, come on for a second, please.
The big thing, I think, is transportation. I think that was probably the biggest blow to this region.
A blow to the region? So it didn't come out that well, you're suggesting?
That's me.
Well, I want to hear what you're going to say.
I was one of the 29 that voted no against that transportation bill. Primarily because, first of all, and we're getting ready to get into the legality of how this law was passed. It's going to put a referendum on the ballot in 2012 to vote for some transportation projects. My understanding of the law is that needs to be constitutional, a constitutional majority to pass that law. But they made the law statutory, which meant that they only needed a simple majority to pass the law. So I think that, number one, that the law in its face is illegal. Number two, in this region, the 10-county metro region, Fulton and DeKalb and the city of Atlanta already pay a penny sales tax. Getting Fulton, DeKalb, first of all, we pay a penny sales tax that we don't control.
Right, the state controls it.
You want to levy another penny sales tax that we won't be able to control. Why would we do that? And Alicia just talked about doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome is insanity. So why would we do that? I think it'd be a hard sell to get the citizens of Fulton and DeKalb County to vote for another penny. Third, that bill, even if you vote for that penny, that money is not guaranteed to go to MARTA. So it's up to this new governing authority in that region to determine what transportation projects will be funded, whether it's roads, transit, or what have you. And there is no guarantee that the people in Cherokee County will be concerned about making sure that MARTA is a functioning entity in Fulton and DeKalb County.
But they can use that money.
But while they'll raise the money in that project list, MARTA would never show up.
Wow. Well, wait a minute now. All the kudos, all the headlines about Atlanta's mayor negotiating this sweetheart deal and railed against some of you Democrats for not going along with it. Wasn't all that? Obviously not. You didn't vote for it.
Well, you know, I respect Mayor Reed and the effort that he did in order to move this transportation bill forward. Let's talk about what it could do. Theoretically, if the penny sales tax were raised in the 10-county region, it would generate over the next 10 years $7.9 billion. With a federal match, you can bring it up to about $13 billion. Now, the mayor is really looking at that $13 billion economic impact to this region as being probably one of the most major things that's going to happen in Atlanta in the next 10 years. And he is pushing hard for that. My problem is that, first of all, I don't think when Fulton and DeKalb County do not vote for that 1 cent, what happens to that particular referendum in this region? Probably it will die. So what will happen then for transportation in this region? The state jumps in with its state planning director and will determine what things will be done. And it will not happen us with local control. So the downside was so high to me that it wasn't worth the possible upside gains that the mayor was really banking on.
And politically, you're saying it's not going to fly. You don't think
No, I don't.
You don't think the MARTA issue is that hot for folks?
You're not going to get MARTA. Well, first of all, on July 1, MARTA is going to reduce the size of its service by about 25%, no matter what we've done, because that bill, number one, goes into effect January 1, 2011, to give them the flexibility on this 50-50. Right now, that 1 cent raises $300 million in this region. Well, in Fulton, DeKalb, in the city of Atlanta, raised $300 million. Half of that can be used on operation, which is $150 million. The other half on capital that's restricted. Right. MARTA getting access to that other $150 million, $140 million of it is already allocated to debt service. So how much money does MARTA get?
Wow.
$10 million. What can MARTA do with $10 million with a $120 million operating deficit? Your bus routes will go away. There is nothing that we've done that solves that.
I thought there was. No, it's not. I'm stunned. I mean, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm stunned. I mean, I was under the impression that MARTA problem had, quote unquote, been solved. At least we'd leave for a while.
Yeah, that's part of the political spin. You know,
we got duped again, huh?
Well, you know, those that got to go make the rule. You know, we have to really understand what's being put in front of us. We really have to be vigilant in. This stuff is tricky. It's tricky at the local level. It's tricky at the state level. It's tricky at the federal level. We passed probably over 2,000 bills and resolutions this particular session. How many of us are versed in all 2,000 of those bills?
No.
I sit on the Ways and Means Committee. Every committee meeting, we were giving out some, I'm sorry, I'm on TV here. We were giving out some tax credit to some industry when state revenues were going in the tank. What kind of sense does that make? What are we doing? But guess what? Folks' friends are being helped. Our communities are suffering. Simone Joy talked about the earned income tax credit. Right now, in the federal government, the earned income tax credit is refundable. That is, if you have no tax liability, but you get the credit, you will get the dollars that credit produces. And the state actually matched that with the federal government. The maximum amount that you can get refunded on the earned income tax credit is what? $26. $26. They said, you can't have that. You can't have $26. Now, what kind of sense does that make?
They really are at war that much against,
in my opinion,
haves against the have-nots, black against white, or Democrats, Republicans?
I would say today, less race, more class. But there are some races down there. There are some people down there that strictly dislike you because of what you look like. And those are few and far between. But there is a class war that's going on down there. And because think about it. In order to serve in the legislature, and Alicia can tell you this, either your company supports you in doing it, you're independently wealthy, or you're retired. Now, there are only a certain number of people, especially in our community, that can serve down there without being compromised in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Because your company can pull us.
So we have to really, well, first of all, this is about the dollar. Well, this problem becomes then community-oriented. We don't circulate the dollar in our community at all.
Right.
So I can't provide a job for nobody in there. You know why? Because I'm spending my money down at the Rim place where they're hiring other folk. We got our money going to the nail shop and it's going back to Korea or wherever it's going. But we can't build up. We want Auburn Avenue to look nice from right here all the way down to the King Center. But we want government to do it. The people who are paying the taxes for government, the class war that's happening is saying, we got to cover y'all's stuff in order to make it happen. How come y'all can't take care of yourself? That's a good question. It's true. But in Atlanta, we control. We succumb to the question because we don't have an answer for it. My thing is that for X number of years, I want to say 400 though, but we have paid into the infrastructure of this society, this economy, this country, and When you convict somebody of a crime, the person that's convicted of the crime does not believe that that sentence is fair. And that's what you have today. You have a group of people now who's having to have to serve time for the crimes of their ancestors, and they don't want to pay the penalty. Ergo, you don't need affirmative action because I didn't do nothing to you. Well, guess what? Your ancestors did. You take advantage of that. Now you got to pay the penalty for that. I don't want to pay that penalty. So?
Representative Howard Mosley, thank you so much. The chairman of the DeKalb County delegation. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Politics 411. Thanks. Come on, Jim.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of the representatives who showed up tonight. All of them confirmed, and I think for some reason they decided not to show up. I don't know the reason. But I do know one of the reasons, and one of the reasons is that the people who did show up have content. They are dealing with real issues, and they're putting forth real solutions. At the end of the day, for African Americans especially, this is a requirement of our politicians and our leaders. We'd like to thank you all for coming out. This has been Newsman.